Hello, everyone. Welcome to ELI's event on strengthening fisheries management through the use of data and data tools, experiences in the Caribbean region. Thank you so much for coming here today to this event. And just a few words about ELI for those who don't know us. We are a nonpartisan research, publication, and education center working to strengthen environmental protection and law and governance worldwide. And we help develop laws and policies, provide education, provide objective analysis, and convene diverse groups to solve problems. ELI's ocean program strengthens ocean and coastal law and policy. We support ocean management systems that are based on local priorities, best available information, and inclusive and effective processes. And we really work in a variety of areas, including fisheries management. And for this particular event, we're having this discussion about the use of data tools and technologies in the Caribbean region. And we have a wonderful panel for you today. We have wonderful panelists. We will start with a presentation by June Masters from the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism about the regional needs and challenges in the Caribbean region. And she will also talk about the Fisheries Manager tool available. Then Dr. Krista Sherman from the Perry Institute of Marine Science will talk to us about the importance of reliable data and relevant tools for fisheries management. Then Natalie Meolis from TNC will talk about FishPath, which is a tool developed by TNC, and specifically about how this tool is used in the Bahamas. And then George Stoyle from RARE will talk to us about OurFish and FishMAT, the Fisheries Management Assessment Tool, both tools used by RARE. After that, Dr. Shelley Ann Cox from Barbados will talk about various tools used in Barbados right now. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Castagna from Trinidad and Tobago will talk about the use of Skylight, another interesting tool. And then Annie Mihajas from the Global Fishing Watch will discuss the Global Fishing Watch tools that are available. Now, after those presentations, we will have a Q&A discussion. And the way we're trying to structure it is for Q&A, if you can submit your questions, any questions you have for panelists, to us in the Q&A box. You can submit them to us at any time during the presentations, and we will save them for the Q&A session at the end. And after that, we will have a discussion. So we will welcome all other participants to share their experiences and discuss these topics in more depth. And for that, you can just submit a request to us on chat, and we will unmute you so you are able to share your thoughts with us. And definitely very important is to make sure that you click the language if you haven't done so yet, but you need to select English or Spanish, because we do have this available via interpretation in Spanish and English. And so please select the language if you haven't done so yet. And with that, I will add my remarks, and we can proceed with our first presentation by June Masters. June, you're still muted. Ah, there you go.
Sorry, good morning, everyone. June Masters here. Just give me a minute to put my presentation on the screen. Is it visible? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And it's visible? My presentation is visible?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning again, everyone. My name is June Masters, and I'm from the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. And I will be speaking to you about the regional needs, the challenges, and the Fisheries Manager tool that we have operating in the CARICOM region. So the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, short CRFM, is made up of 17 member states, all the CARICOM countries, plus TCI and Anguilla. These are overseas British territories. It's an intergovernmental organization, and it's the CARICOM arm for fisheries. What are our data needs and challenges? This is summed up in the CCCFP, and it's in Article 11, Statistics and Research, and it says that the participating parties, they're asked to collect data. So they need to collect and compile fisheries catch and fishing effort, registration and licensing data, biological, ecological, economic, social, aquaculture, and any other relevant data that is needed. They need to conduct research, and I have a number of areas there, including fish stock, status of fish stocks, effect of environmental changes, management and conservation measures, social and economic performance of the fisheries, and so on. And they need to analyze that data, and they need to share that data with other participating parties, as well as the competent agency, and the Secretariat has been declared the competent agency. So overall, member states should collect data, they should analyze the data, they should share the data and the information, and the Secretariat must be prepared to assist the member states to collect and to analyze and so on, and also be prepared to receive the information from member states. For this work, we found a solution. We have tried many things over the years, and we have had some that, went through the phases, as from DOS coming up through to Fox Pro and so on. And at this time, we have found a solution that we're trying out, and that is under a project that we have with Iceland. You can see where Iceland is and where CARICOM is, but we have worked together with Iceland for quite a number of years, and they have assisted us with this work in finding something that can help us at this time. And so it's under the CARIS project. And note that it's Caribbean and Iceland put together to give you that name, the CARIS project, that we're doing it. And what did we come up with? The approach we used in creating the solution originated, of course, as we said, in Iceland, a framework that they have been using for a number of years to support their fisheries, sustainable fishing practices in Iceland. And the tool is the Fisheries Manager. The approach is based on the Enterprise Resource Planning System, ERP, and that system uses modules for each function, and there is a central location for data storage, and that's in the cloud. And the system would be customized for fisheries at the national level and the regional level in the CARICOM region during a piloting phase of the project. So we started out with a piloting phase, and this is just a look at, on my right, a look at what the dashboard would look like for the system. So this is what the workflow looks like. So the system would be used to collect data from can be used to collect data from all those sources. That's on my left. And of course, that would be stored, and it can be, you pull it out when you're ready to analyze and to look at it and to make your reports and to make your management decisions and so on. So that's a little look at what the workflow would look like. So let's start to see what we did in the region. We started with 3 member states piloting the database, and those still are St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Jamaica. The piloting phase had these member states to customize what it would look like to collect data using the system, what it would look like to have reports being done by the system, and how to manage the data and use the data for your decision-making purposes. The most advanced member state so far is St. Kitts and Nevis. They have gone way ahead of everybody else, and they are doing quite well. And so I'm going to share their story with you as to where they're at and how it happened for them. So 14 months into the activities for St. Kitts and Nevis, and so far they have actually started using the fish, they have implemented now, and they're using the fisheries manager to collect data on fish landings from all landing sites. They have their data stored nicely in the cloud and using it up in terms of making their reports. And at this time, we actually have a student in Iceland doing further work in the system, creating templates for reports using different reporting tools such as R and so on. So they're doing really nicely. So I look at some of the, just some screenshots of what it looks like when they put their data in. So they have some species there, they have entered their landings data, and they have some species, they have their vessels in, and they collect data using trip interviews. And that's using tablets on the beach side. That's one of the data collectors working right there. In terms of reporting, you know, this is what it looks like. You can have access to your raw data. They have access to their raw data. And not only that, but you can use third-party reporting tools to access your data. And right now, the most popular one that's being used in St. Lucia is the Microsoft Power BI. And that's a little screenshot of some of the reports that have been created for St. Kitts, sorry. We're also use R, and as I said, we have a student, the actual program director for St. Kitts and Nevis in Iceland at this time, and she's working on the R templates for making reports. And these are some of the examples that she has done so far. Things like getting out your sampling days using R, your weight by month, by site using R, and sampling overview again using R. So it's very versatile. Also catch reports, the screenshots of what she has been doing so far. Catch reports again, and that's her and Billy, or the CEO for the Fisheries Manager, and that is Andrea Brown from St. Kitts, and she's in Iceland. There's a little video there. I'll just show you, I don't know if it will play, a few seconds. Right. That was at the national level. At the regional level, the CRFM Secretariat is developing a regional fisheries manager as well. We just started a couple months ago to customize the system to be able to receive the information from the member states. That's a kind of schematic look at what we're hoping, that we'll have a centralized system where the member states each year, I collect data from them as to their catches, their vessels, and so on and so forth. It's made up into the CRFM statistics report and shared. So we're hoping to make the process a whole lot simpler and easier for me. I'm doing it manually now. We're hoping to get all of that easily done in a regional fisheries manager. So this is the goal we're aiming for. We want to centralize the database, all the data that I'm collecting, to be able to receive them as our mandate stipulates. We should be able to receive them and share them. We want to standardize data as well. For example, like the fish species, we know most countries have different names that they call species, and sometimes that can get mixed up. So we want to be able to have a standardized approach to that. And to make, of course, their work simpler and easier to produce and to share the data, both from the Secretariat and from member states. So we are configuring at this stage. We are looking at how member states will be able to send the data to us at the Secretariat to make it easier. The ones who are using the TFM, it will be an easy transfer because they will be fully compatible with the system. However, for those who are not using the TFM, there is still the migration process. We would have migration templates that they would put the data in, and I would be able to upload the data quite easily into the regional TFM. So no problems there. And right now, this is what it should look like, but we're not there yet. And we don't know if we'll get there. There will always be somebody who will probably don't wish to use it, but even so, it will not be a problem. So the overall status right now is that we have 3 member states piloting. St. Kitts and Nevis is far ahead, and the template that the kind of customization and the work that we have done with St. Kitts and Nevis, it's very similar for how most member states collect data and store data and the reports that they wish to make. So it should serve as a good example and a good way for others to implement the system if they so desire. Jamaica is working at it. Billy just had some training sessions with them, and they are moving on. They're not at implementation yet. They are bigger, so it will probably take a little bit more work. And St. Lucia as well is also trying it out to see what it looks like. And then we have the regional one being piloted by myself at the CRFM Secretariat and the CEO of the Fisheries Manager from Iceland. So that's it. Thank you very much. Hope I kept within my 10 minutes time frame.
Thank you so much, June. And just a reminder for everyone to please submit any questions you have into the Q&A feature, so we will save them for after the end of presentations. And next we will have a presentation by Krista Sherman, please.
Good morning. I'll be speaking on the importance of reliable and relevant tools for fisheries. Okay. Can you see my video now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. I'll be speaking on the importance of reliable data and relevant tools for fishery management. My name is Dr. Krista Sherman. I'm a senior scientist with the Perry Institute for Marine Science, and I've been doing research in the Bahamas for 16 years. Currently, I lead our Fisheries Research and Conservation Program, which is one of the 4 programmatic focal areas for our organization. And with our fisheries program, we use a suite of techniques and interdisciplinary approaches to promote sustainable fisheries and healthy ecosystems that support biodiversity, livelihoods, ecosystem services, and provide science-based recommendations for sustainability. Within the Bahamas and throughout the Caribbean region, fisheries are incredibly important. They're an intricate part of our cultural heritage. They provide food security and are an important source of nutrition and support a multi-million-dollar industry that sustains the livelihoods of thousands of fishers. But we know fisheries are under threat. They're under threat from overfishing, from IUU fishing, from climate change, invasive species, diseases, and natural disasters. So 30% of fish species have been overexploited, and that represents significant losses to the ecosystem services that they provide and to these socioeconomic contributions. So addressing threats, the threats that I mentioned to these species requires research at both the species level and at the ecosystem level to inform fisheries policy and governance and to raise awareness among stakeholders to mitigate threats and increase support for conservation initiatives. A couple of years ago, I was able to work with a group of scientists, and we examined the use of tools across broad areas of fish biology, and we identified potential knowledge gaps and solutions in each area in order to guide and inform future research and better understand wild fish populations. So there are a whole range of traditional, innovative, and novel tools that are being employed to understand all aspects of the biology of fish populations. And these range from sort of the traditional surveys and assessments, both looking at species and their habitats, but also getting information, local ecological knowledge from stakeholders, to tagging and telemetry tools to look at movement patterns throughout different habitats and migration routes, to some of the molecular tools that have been used and are increasingly evolving, some of the omics and eDNA tools, as well as the traditional statistical and modeling tools often used by fisheries scientists for stock assessments. At PIMS, these are the tools that we most frequently use for our applied conservation research projects to assess the status of marine species and the condition of their habitats. And this is a snapshot of the fisheries sector in the Bahamas. It's comprised of both commercial, recreational, and subsistence fishing, and they're hugely important to the Bahamian economy. And so much of our research and our outreach efforts has been focused in the Bahamas. The Bahamas is spread out over a vast area, which makes it really challenging for monitoring, surveillance, and enforcement. And fisheries are legally under the mandate of the government of the Bahamas through the Department of Marine Resources, and they're supported with the enforcement of fisheries and fishery regulations by a number of agencies, the most recent of which is the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network. And a few years ago, we conducted a review looking at both contemporary or traditional species that are targeted for fisheries, as well as emerging fisheries in the country, and looked at some of our conservation successes, some of the challenges that we're experiencing, some of the achievements that we've made, and where we may need to go in the future. So the commercial fisheries sector in the Bahamas supports both domestic and export markets. There are very few species-specific regulations that we currently have, and research needs are varied for management. A lot of the research that has been done has focused on stock assessments for a few different species, looking at the status of spawning aggregations. That's primarily been done for bonefish and Nassau grouper and a few other groupers. Looking at population genetics of commercially important species, including Nassau grouper, spiny lobster, and queen conch, looking at movement patterns of individuals. There's been a lot of work into queen conch biology and more recently aquaculture, work into spiny lobsters as well, and the sustainability of different harvesting methods for commercially important species. We've also done quite a bit of work looking at the condition of habitats and threats that are impacting those habitats, primarily reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses, because of their critical importance to commercial fishery species. But there's still a lot of gaps that exist, primarily looking at connectivity and the drivers of connectivity and the patterns of those throughout the archipelago, and the impacts of climate change, as well as the socioeconomic valuation of fisheries and some of the drivers impacting the fisheries sector. Recreational fisheries are also extremely lucrative for the country, generating over $527 million a year, and supporting a lot of communities in the Family Islands in particular, with over 18,000 jobs directly and indirectly related to this particular fisheries sector. And a lot of the historic research is focused on best handling practices, because it's primarily a catch and release fishery that's targeting bonefish, permit, and tarpon. but there has been some additional work in other species as well, because there are some pelagics and reef fish associated with this fishery. And some of that work has focused on migration patterns, thermal tolerance, and most recently we conducted a climate vulnerability assessment in collaboration with the Environmental Defense Fund, also working with local fishing guides and other NGOs with a focus on the Bahamas and Belize. But even within the recreational fisheries sector, there are still gaps, a lot of it relating to mapping of some of the critical nursery habitats and spawning areas for these species and how climate change is likely to impact them. The subsistence or artisanal fisheries sector is probably an area where we need the most work. It's largely unmanaged and it's extremely data deficient, but it's a really important source of nutrition for family island communities because they're using it for personal consumption. So it's low impact fishing gear, targeting primarily traditional species. And obviously we have multiple landing points all throughout the archipelago, which makes it challenging to collect and understand what's actually coming out and being harvested. And our most recent work in this area has looked at the impacts of COVID on subsistence fishing. So stay tuned for updates from that project, but we will be doing more work in the subsistence fisheries space moving forward. And so we also have emerging fisheries and work in this area as well, because they have the potential to expand the fishing sector, provide additional food security and income for a greater number of fishers. But obviously there are challenges here because there are a lot of data gaps here related to landings, related to the population dynamics of these species, and the ecological functions that they provide. So some of the work that we've done on emerging fisheries is focused on parrotfish, as some of the traditional finfish like grouper and snapper have been depleted, documenting changes on local reefs and increase in catch by local fishers for some of these species. We've also done assessments of sea cucumber, and we'll be doing more work on that this year, more stock assessments, but the initial fishery that was established was not sustainable and resulted in a collapse of local sea cucumber populations in Andros. And we've also done work on Antilogorgia elizabethae, which is a soft coral that's been exported for the Bahamas, that was exported for the Bahamas for a number of years and generated a lot of income, so supporting a direct export fishery. And essentially what we've done with the information that we've collected is combine all these different approaches to develop species management plans. We've done two so far, one for Nassau grouper that integrates a range of different types of data from the population genetics work, looking at diversity and health and population structure, to acoustic telemetry, looking at the connectivity between reefs and spawning aggregation sites for these species, incorporating input from stakeholder perspectives about the status of the fishery and how that should be managed, as well as in-water assessments and looking at some of the fisheries dependent data collected by DMR, so changes over time. More recently, we developed a management plan for Antilogorgia elizabethae that was based on individual-based modeling, looking at different harvesting scenarios, taking into account the field experiments that we did and the biology of the species to inform management recommendations for sustainable harvesting if the government decides to reopen this fishery again. Additionally, we have worked on developing a marine biophysical monitoring plan for the protected area system for the country, and that really provides a standardized framework to collect data that can be used to adaptively manage marine resources within the protected area system. So the ability for us to be able to consistently and reliably collect data is extremely critical to reduce some of these knowledge gaps that we do have surrounding fisheries and to apply appropriate management measures to sustain fisheries. So we really do need to improve the link between science and management and ensure that regulations can be adapted as new information becomes available. It's also going to be extremely important to revisit some of the policy and governance frameworks that exist to ensure that they're fair, equitable, and transparent. And we will need to increase the capacity for enforcement and working with communities so that there's better compliance for fishery regulations and conservation initiatives that exist. And as the previous speaker mentioned, data management is an ongoing issue, but there are a number of amazing tools that have been developed over the years to continue to work toward standardization, calibration, integration, and accessibility. And obviously, where we're data deficient for certain species, whether it's emerging or traditional fisheries species, and their habitats, adopting some of the precautionary approaches and ecosystem-based approaches for fishery management. So I would say that the continued development of emerging tools that are coming out, together with the use of multiple methodologies and interdisciplinary approaches, along with some of these traditional methods, definitely represent some of the best avenues that we have to further improve our understanding of marine species and fish populations, and to contribute to their effective conservation and sustainable management. So this is my contact information. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I will turn it over to the moderator to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista. That was a wonderful amount of detail, and thank you again so much for speaking on this. Next, we have Natalie Miaolis from TNC.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, to some in our region. My name is Natalie Miaolis-Melis. I'm a fisheries specialist for the Nature Conservancy's Northern Caribbean program. In the Caribbean region, the Nature Conservancy's vision is a resilient Caribbean where both people and nature can thrive. And throughout the region, we work in 17 countries and territories. And we have offices on eight of those countries. And throughout this region, as the two previous speakers spoke, we are so connected to fisheries, as Dr. Sherman mentioned, for our cultural way of life and our economic vitality. But as we all know, and we're all on this call today, that fisheries across our region and our globe are faced with the issue of having a lack of data and having a lack of capacity, resources, and financing to adequately manage their fisheries. And specifically in our region is the battle with data limited, not having that data to manage your fisheries. And therefore, we are managing almost our fisheries blind. We don't know where to go. We don't know how to manage. And quite frankly, our countries do not have the abilities, the resources to collect that data. They don't have the resources necessarily to do all of the stock assessments needed. And they also oftentimes lack the technical capacity to then analyze that data. And so where do we go? What do we do? Well, the Nature Conservancy has been looking at this issue since 2014, and how can we fill these gaps, but also realizing and filling those gaps that fisheries management is so much more than one stock assessment, right? We all know that fisheries management is also, who are your fishers? What is your industry like? What are the needs? What are the gaps? What's your enforcement like? What are the cultures and practices of the people? And so if you don't look at fisheries management in that holistic view, then we can create all of the fisheries management that we want, but are we creating viable, implementable management? And so in 2014, the Nature Conservancy convened and gathered over 40 stock assessment scientists from around the world and practitioners, along with CSRSO, NOAA, and SNAP, to look at all of the management measures, all of the stock assessments for data limited fisheries that exist in the world, all the monitoring options, and say, okay, how can we create a tool and a process for fisheries managers that lack the capacity to even start down the road of knowing, what do I do? How do I manage my fishery? And where do I begin? And so this group of over 40 scientists and practitioners came together and created the FishPath decision support tool and process to try to help move fisheries from an undermanaged fishery to a sustainable fishery. And this comes from the point of, where do I go? I know I have a fishery. I know I need to management. What do I do? Are MPAs the answer? Are closed seasons? What do we do about fishing permits? And that is where the FishPath tool and process can help support fisheries managers that are limited in their capacity to start down the path of sustainable fisheries management. Now, the FishPath process and tool is made up of 3 components. So the tool is an online decision support tool that is open source and can be used by any fisheries managers or anyone that's just interested or researches fisheries as well. And the tool allows practitioners or managers to input all of the data that they know about their fishery, or maybe data that they don't know. If you don't know the information on your fishery, put it into the tool, and the tool allows managers to have access to a results page, which I'll show with you shortly, that gives you options for management and monitoring based on the aspects that you know or don't know of your fishery. That tool is supported by a FishPath process. This process is where the engagement happens not only with the fisheries managers, but with communities, other researchers as well, to build the capacity of the fisheries managers so that they can also support the implementation of the management measures and monitoring measures, as well as engagement with communities to help educate, build compliance for fisheries management, and also bring them into the design process to have a robust, holistic, and hopefully viable management plan. And then those 2 are supported by the FishPath network. Our network is made up of over 19 geographies and 200 species around the world that are implementing FishPath now. And so those that are implementing FishPath have access to this network of other practitioners, other managers around the world that are implementing. And this is an opportunity for lessons learned, also sharing what's working, but also helping to support each other in the decision-making process of how to manage their fisheries. FishPath is wonderful, but it does not recommend any single option for fisheries management or monitoring. It does not conduct stock assessments, and it does not tell you, it does not prescribe. What FishPath does is it shows you what your options are given your current resources, capacity, and knowledge of your fishery, as well as what is your current enforcement capacity. And so it's really a guide for fisheries managers. It does not prescribe. And this process is done in hand, and specifically here in the Bahamas, is done in hand with the managing agency, which is the Bahamas Department of Marine Resources, and is a support tool and process, but it is not the deciding factor at all. And so here in the Bahamas, as Dr. Sherman spoke to the importance of fisheries for the cultural and economic importance, we wanted to focus on the key fisheries in the country. And so we began this process of implementing FishPath with the Queen Conch fishery. And in the beginning, we realized that we obviously did not have enough data on the fish species. We knew that the Bahamas was lacking the capacity to manage the species, but also we realized that fishers and communities were really in a difficult position in terms of trusting a lot of the science that was coming from and being produced. They didn't understand, how are these assessments done? they just didn't understand it, and if they don't trust it. And that was causing a big problem when it came to support of management for Queen Conch. And so we knew that along this process, we had to engage fishers, we had to implement engagement in order to give them an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process, but also educate and build compliance and support for fisheries management. We also knew that we had to conduct stock assessment training for the Department of Marine Resources in order to build their capacity for managing and monitoring their fisheries on a regular basis, given the data that they are already collecting. And so the process that we undertook was we first always start our processes with implementing the tool, and the tool itself, going through the tool, putting all the information that we know about our fishery into the tool, and then sitting down with our fisheries managers and other researchers in the country and in the region that have worked for many years researching these species, to put all of that knowledge into the tool and then review the results of the tool as really that starting block of where do we go, how do we move forward. And then we go through the engagement process and analysis of management options, and we use all of those steps along the process to then inform the development of a management plan. And here in the Bahamas, since we have went through this FishPath process, we now have a draft management plan for Queen Conch in the country. I want to show you what the online tool looks like. Here is a screenshot of an example. It's a very simple process in terms of there's yes and no questions that you can go through. And it looks at data collection, assessment, management measures. And like I said, you input the information that you have. So if you know, but also if you don't know the information on your fishery, that's very important as well. Because if you don't know that piece of information, it impacts what type of management and monitoring that you can successfully implement now. Here is an example of the results page of a FishPath tool. These are for monitoring options. And the great thing about the FishPath tool is, as you can see on my screen, there are hundreds of monitoring options. Which monitoring option should we implement? Well, the tool provides a red light, yellow light, green light system that shows green, as in this might be good for your country to implement. Yellow, there's a couple warnings. You might not have the capacity. You might not have the capacity to implement this type of monitoring, or you might not have the enforcement. And then red is definitely a red flag. But what's great about the tool is as you have these results, you can click on each option and it will show you why are these being flagged. Looking at these considerations. What do you need to take into consideration if you want to implement one of these monitoring measures? And the same thing for your management options as well, right? So this is an example of, it's not prescribing management options, it's showing you essentially a pro and con list of what considerations you would need to think about if you wanted to implement a certain monitoring or management option. And in the world of fisheries management, where you have all of these options that exist and you have limited capacity, this is a really great starting block to start that discussion and say, what can we do? What can't we do? If we want to do this, what considerations are we going to need to take in? What do we need to improve in order to make some of these management and monitoring options feasible for us? As I said before, after we've gone through the tool, we have the results. That engagement piece is very important. Here in the Bahamas for Queen Conch, we actually designed an engagement process where we went to fishers, met them at landing sites, and had them collect Queen Conch, bring it to the landing sites, and we taught fishers how to collect genetic material and to measure indicators of maturity on a Queen Conch. So here in this picture is a fisher from East End, Grand Bahama, that is measuring a Queen Conch. at one of the maturity indicators, and he is collecting the data. And we were able to show that, one, fishers do want to be involved in this process. Secondly, that fishers can be trained in data collection efforts and be involved in that process, which helps drive compliance. And third, we conducted a pre and post assessment of the fishers that participated in this process. And we were able to show that 100% of the fishers that participated in the process, in the engagement process, all supported management measures of conch. And so we were able to show how this type of engagement is very important into driving that compliance. And why this is such a critical piece of the FishPath process is because you have to have compliance in your fishery, especially throughout our region where we lack the adequate enforcement in many of our countries to enforce our management efforts and our regulations. So you have to have compliance from your communities and a level of support. Otherwise, we will make regulations and we're making essentially paper management that really is not being implemented and not being effective. The other important piece of this that I'll reiterate is that we were able to meet with fishers, survey them, and actually have their feedback on what were some of their concerns in terms of what were trends that they were seeing in the health and the stock of the species, and also what were some of their suggestions in terms of monitoring and management efforts. So this is a critical piece in that process into informing adequate management and monitoring options for our fishery. So after we went through the FishPath process for queen conch, we realized that, okay, we can use this process and this tool to also focus on other species. And that is when the Department of Marine Resources, after having gone through the FishPath process and tool for queen conch, said, okay, let's now take this and focus on our other key species, which are snapper and grouper. So we have commenced the process now. And we have implemented the tool to look at possible management and monitoring options for snapper and grouper species. And what's different with this process and tool this time is that we are looking at multiple snapper species, multiple grouper species, not just one singular. And that is because we are trying to address, once again, the capacity issue of many of our countries. It can often take a lot of time to go through these processes. And if you're focusing on one species at one time, it can really take you a long time to come up with some adequate management and monitoring options for your fisheries. And so we have developed a FishPath tool and process that allows us to look at multiple species at once, and also the combined effect of those management options together on that species and multiple species. And what this does is it allows the fisheries manager to make those decisions, hopefully in an expedited time, and also look at the compounding impacts of multiple management measures on multiple species over time. And so that is what we have commenced now for the snapper and grouper species. And what we first did with DMR is we said, okay, let's try to hone in on what are your key species of interest. What are the key species that are dependent on our communities for livelihoods, or what are also your key species that for you that you feel are most threatened. And that's also based on research and scientific research. And as you can see, we conducted some modeling assessments to see what impact some of those top management options and monitoring options would have on the species itself. So here we're looking at lane snapper, and we're looking at the impacts of spawning timing and size and maturity, and looking at those management measures. What are the impacts? And the benefits of looking at and having these modeling scenarios is it really helps managers understand, if I do choose this, what is the impact of this? What if we couple a multiple management measures? What is the possible impact on the health of the stock? And now we are in the process for Snapper and Grouper of taking all that information and working with the Department of Marine Resources to now use that process, use the information from the tool, and we hope that it can now inform the development of management plans for key species of snapper. Also, along the FishPath process, I'm talking about looking at fisheries at a holistic management, and we've talked a lot about data limited, and we have looked at what could be some solutions for helping fill those data gaps for the Bahamas. And some of the pilots that we have implemented have been with fishers directly, having electronic logbooks that fishers can report directly to the Department of Marine Resources, their catch data, and also tools that allow fisheries managers, fisheries officers to collect data and have it automatically go into the manager's system, the Department of Marine Resources fisheries management system. We've also piloted vessel monitoring systems for vessels to help with enforcement. And also we've piloted the first ever seafood processor traceability system in the country, which allowed the seafood processor to track from sea to the end consumer all electronically as well. And so we're hoping that by supporting these type of electronic monitoring systems and piloting them, that we can learn to see which systems are effective for the country, which might not be, which can help fill these data gaps. Also, as Dr. Sherman spoke, the importance of the economic impact of fisheries and having the country and our managers understand that value is very important. And so the Nature Conservancy undertook an assessment of that economic impact of fisheries because we wanted to really be able to show that value to further advocate for the importance of fisheries management. Prior to this assessment, the country was using the GDP estimate of fisheries impact and saying that it was only 1%. Our assessment found that it contributes at least 20% to GDP. And so this is a powerful tool that we can use and that we hope others in the country can use for advocating for increased financing and support for fisheries management in the country. And last but not least, the other critical component of fisheries management is enforcement. And so that is also another factor that, and caveat that is looked at in the FishPath tool when we're looking at that red light, green light, yellow light system is, does a country have the enforcement capacity to implement that management or monitoring measure? And here in the Bahamas, as the rest of the Caribbean, we struggle with fisheries enforcement. We have the largest EEZ in the region. And so we knew that we also needed to come together to help improve fisheries enforcement in the country and overall marine enforcement in the country. And so the Nature Conservancy brought together enforcement agencies, all the enforcement agencies to come together to create actually the first fisheries 5-year plan. And from that 5-year Marine Action Partnership Plan, we are halfway through it. And I can report that we are actively implementing the actions within that plan. All of the agencies that signed onto the plan actually signed an MOU. The Ministry of National Security, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Department of Marine Resources are implementing those activities. And so it has been successful from that approach. And one of the activities within this Marine Action Partnership project is also utilizing some of the technology of Skylight, which we will hear a little bit later about today. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you the FishPath tool and process, and hope that others in our region can learn from the tool about how we are trying to implement the tool and help our fisheries managers make informed decisions where we just don't have the capacity to do so. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalie. Next we have George Stoyle from RARE.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, hi, my name's George Stoyle. I work for I'm the Director of Technology Solutions for RARE. And for those of you that don't know, RARE is a non-profit NGO that empowers communities around the world to protect the environment through community-driven initiatives and essentially behavior adoption principles. So we collaborate with communities to jointly manage their natural resources, and we tackle things like challenges such as climate change, overfishing, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Obviously, I won't dive into our full history right now, but what's key is that at RARE, we harness behavioral and social science in combination with ecological science to create what we hope is lasting positive impacts in the places where we work. So I predominantly work on a program called Fish Forever, and Fish Forever enables communities to take the lead in managing their coastal areas through something called Managed Access and Reserves, or MA+R. And this approach grants communities exclusive fishing rights in designated zones, and this is a map showing showing all our managed access and reserve areas across the Caribbean coast of Honduras. So reserves are placed. So managed access gives exclusive fishing rights to communities. Reserves are placed within managed access areas, which allows fish populations to thrive in the no-take zones and then eventually spill over beyond the boundaries of the reserves, ultimately enhancing local fishing areas. So it's about finding the sweet spot between conservation and sustainable fishing, hopefully ensuring a future for sustainable multi-species fisheries. And just to throw out a few stats, which I think everyone's kind of showing similar figures, and I'm sure most people here know these kind of these figures, but small-scale fisheries support 200 million jobs worldwide, hauling in around half of the world's catch, and that's actually likely to be an underestimate, as I'm sure we all know, since most of it, or a lot of it, goes unrecorded. And then considering that nearly 3 billion people depend on fish for essential nutrition, managing these coastal fisheries has massive implications. Essentially, we're talking about the well-being of nearly a quarter of the world's population. And so a huge problem, as everyone has alluded to, is trying to understand small-scale fisheries, is that the contributions made by these fisheries often slip through the cracks in national data collection efforts, often due to the apparent small size of the catches. It's often maybe considered insignificant compared to industrial fisheries. Also, the remote locations in some areas, the decentralized and varied nature of operations, and all this makes it very difficult to capture comprehensive information. And also, traditional methods of collecting data can quickly hit a wall with limited capacity for processing and analyzing data. And this seems to be a theme among other speakers here. And as we all know, understanding and managing fisheries hinges on reliable data. So overcoming this obstacle is critical. So to help overcome this, RARE work on the ground, gathering a wealth of data in 8 different countries through things like community profiling, social surveys, ecological assessments, and these include regular studies on the big 3 tropical ecosystems being coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses. We're also looking into things like larval dispersal data, fisher registrations, fisheries value chains, and savings clubs, and other kind of financial studies. But crucially, we're also collecting daily long-term fisheries catch data using community members themselves as the data collectors. And to make this happen, we have a suite of mobile apps and various web-based tools, one of which is called OurFish. And OurFish is an Android-based mobile app designed specifically for fish buyers, fish traders, with the aim of collecting catch data, as well as providing detailed financial information to better manage the buyers, the traders' income and expenditure. It's designed essentially to mimic the traditional paper-based method of data collection as closely as possible, And the app itself provides real-time financial summaries to help users manage their business. And it's important to note that OurFish is more of a business management tool than it is a catch recording platform. And this is, as we found over the years, this is the real incentive that makes it be used by the target users. So we also provide automated results and management recommendations in real time through a suite of free online tools. And these provide a comprehensive picture of trends in catch over time across multi-country scales. And we found that it really beats traditional data collection hands down in terms of the frequency of the data collected, because we're getting data every day, almost every hour, indefinitely, as the buyer and the fisher transactions take place. And then when you integrate this with in water surveys, underwater surveys, and the various socioeconomic and environmental data sets, you get this holistic view of the fisheries health and its impact on ecosystems and the communities. And this is just a quick snapshot of the data collected so far. So you can see we're collecting data in multiple areas around the globe, and so far we've recorded 3 million kilos of fish with a total value of over $5.5 million, and that's just with 465 buyers. And as we scale, we're expecting these figures to go up exponentially. So I just want to give you a better idea of how this app is used in the field. So I'm just going to show you a quick clip from a short film that I made back in 2017, and this was following a 2-year pilot study in Myanmar. So I'm just going to show you a quick clip of this.
What we need to do is we need to understand the fishery. After better understanding the fishery, we can work out what is the best solution to go to sustainable fishery. My name is Du Ying Tun. I'm supervising the data collector because we have developed an application to collect the fish catch in small scale fishery. This is our data collector. Now he's collecting the data. So now he's called the fish, and he scanned the ID of the fisherman and collect the catch.
The challenge now is, can we understand fishing activity, understand the biology and ecology of some of these really important commercial species that communities depend on? And can we develop practices that enable that fishery to be sustainable, but at the same time protect the critical biodiversity that's so important for the planet?
Okay, so moving on, we have a data portal, which is a public-facing website, and we have a load of dashboards and other tools built around all our data collected, which provides visualizations, interpretations, and recommendations to help make more informed decisions on how to better manage fisheries. And of particular note of all these tools is the Fisheries Management Assessment tool. And this uses OurFish data as well as other data, so we can also plug in enumerator-based data and some of our historical data sets and data sets from other partners. And the tool is used to assess small-scale fisheries, visualize the data, and provide science-backed fisheries management recommendations. So the tool walks you through a 5-step process. It starts with choosing a specific location and the species you're focusing on. And then you pick out key performance indicators and set benchmarks. And then you get to play around with visualizing your data and trying out different assessment methods. And after that, it's all about making sense of your findings and figure out what rules and regulations to put in place. And all this helps you wrap up a flexible fishery management plan that adapts over time. And it's centered on specific indicators. And here we've selected CPUE as an indicator, but there are many more. And these are basically numbers and measurements that are pulled from the data we've got. And they're super handy for giving us a clear picture of how a fishery is doing, especially when we measure them against the goals and standards we set beforehand. So these are the list of all the performance indicators. So we've got things like fishing gear, reporting effort, species composition, average length, trophic level, etc. And so based on these reference points, a series of interpretations and suggestions are provided, which can help in the formation of fisheries management plans. And so that was the FishMAT tool in a very small nutshell. But there's more information on our portal, which is portal.rare.org. And you can have a look at all these dashboards that we have on that website. And then I thought it was worth noting that we're also starting to use the financial data collected in the app, because we're collecting the transaction data, and then we're building financial statements designed to be recognized by formal financial institutions. And the idea here is that this will help fish buyers and fishers themselves to gain access to the formal economy. So things like financial services offered by banks, savings accounts, insurance, and affordable financial loans, with the idea of avoiding the often predatory loans, which are much harder to repay. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, George. So it looks like our next speaker, Dr. Shelley Ann Cox from Barbados, is not here, unfortunately. So we will go ahead with the next presentation from Lieutenant Commander Daniel Castagna from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to our guests and to my host. Just allow me to share my screen. So, good morning again. My name is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Castagna from the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and I'll be presenting this morning on the use of the tool Skylight and how we use it for maritime domain awareness in Trinidad and Tobago. So allow me to introduce the tool to you. Skylight is a maritime analyst tool that is used for identifying suspicious behavior by vessels. How it achieves this is by analyzing data from sources such as AIS transmissions from vessels, as well as satellite surveillance data using sensors such as radar, optical, infrared, and radio frequency sensors, and cross-referencing this with information from vessel registry databases and other vessel information databases. Unlike vessel tracking software, such as Vessel Finder or Marine Traffic, Skylight does not display real-time information of where vessels are. What Skylight displays is the alert or alerts generated by suspicious behavior of these vessels. So when the vessel information transmitted by AIS or detections by satellite sensors indicate suspicious behavior, this behavior generates an alert with it, which is then displayed on the interface that is accessed by the analyst via a web platform. And the analyst is then able to select these alerts and take that information, cross-reference it with other platforms to launch an investigation into a particular occurrence. Skylight achieves most of it by the use of artificial intelligence, which allows the platform to analyze vast amounts of data that would be almost impossible for a human analyst to get through. On the left side of the screen, you see the different types of events that Skylight is able to ascertain or able to detect. So rendezvous between different vessels that are transmitting AIS will show up as a standard rendezvous. Where there is a vessel that is transmitting on AIS that behaves in a manner that the AI detects to be indicative of a rendezvous, but there's no second transmitting vessel in the vicinity, this then shows up as a dark rendezvous or potential indication of a vessel rendezvousing with another vessel that is not displaying its AIS. Entry alerts are generated where a user defines a particular area, such as an environmentally protected area. We use it for territorial waters or exclusive economic zones. And anytime an AIS transmitting vessel enters that area, the platform generates an alert that we can see. Fishing activity is also detected by this platform. The platform is able to identify various types of fishing activity based on the behavior of the vessel. Potential dark activity is where a vessel switches off its AIS for a particular period of time. Of course, there are many legitimate reasons why vessels may switch their AIS transponders off, but when they do, this generates an alert so that analysts can see that this is happening. Speed range alerts indicate vessels that are transiting within a user-defined speed range. Of course, many fishing activities and other illegal activities occur within particular speed ranges. So users are able to select a speed range and generate alerts whenever vessels in an area slow down or operate within this range of speed. And satellite detection, satellites are able to detect the presence of vessels using different types of sensors, radar, night lights, optical, and radio frequency sensors. And where there is no AIS transmitting vessel corresponding to a satellite detection, the platform shows this up as a potential dark vessel. So it is able to detect vessels even where the vessel is not transmitting AIS. Of course, this is dependent on the satellite being overhead at the time of the vessel's location. On the right-hand side of the screen, we show a typical workflow, how we use Skylight on a daily basis. So we typically start our maritime data analysis using the Skylight platform. Once we detect, or once there are alerts on Skylight, these alerts would give us specific information about the activity, the type of activity, the date and time it has occurred, as well as the lat and long of the location of that activity. We also get vessel information, the MMSI or the identifying number of that vessel, the flag state of the vessel, the type of vessel it may be, and the AIS history of this vessel. This is all dependent on the vessel transmitting its MMSI via AIS. Once the MMSI is available, Skylight uses that MMSI to do a search on databases that it has access to, and where this information on flag state, type of vessel, and etc. is registered on a database, we then get access to that. And what we do with this information, we're able to then go to other platforms where we can cross-reference the information or do further analysis. But the information that we get from the Skylight platform allows us to build our idea of trends of activity, heat maps or zones of intense activity, zones that we may need to focus on. And we're also able to build a list of vessels of interest. So where we see vessels that are potentially engaged in illegal activity or suspicious activity within our jurisdictional waters, we take a note of these vessels, and we've started compiling a list of vessels that have been engaged in suspicious activity. And in cases where we're able to confirm that these vessels have been engaged in illegal activity, we use the information from Skylight to add to the case files for these vessels. And the ultimate goal of this information, or what we use this information for, we take this information on the activity, trends, zones of interest, and we use that to streamline our operations to launch targeted, or what we term intelligence-led operations. And these operations, obviously, we launch with the hope of interdicting suspicious vessels, arresting offending vessels, and ultimately, we're working towards successful prosecution of offending vessels or offenders in our local courts. Some of the benefits of this platform, obviously, it allows us to build our domain awareness of what is occurring in our maritime space. We get to identify potential IUU events, get to identify potential offending vessels and hotspots of where illegal fishing may occur. We also get access to data that we normally would not have had access to, data that then supports our maritime patrols and operations. And these next 2 points, we're not fully there as yet, but this is where we're working towards, and we're hoping that this data would support decision makers in allocating resources specifically to combating illegal fishing. And we're ultimately hopeful that the data that we get from Skylight will eventually support prosecution of offenders in local courts. That is our goal, and that's what we're working towards right now. Of course, there are some limitations to the platform. dark vessels or vessels that are not transmitting EIS are not always detected or not very easily detected. And of course, small vessels are not detected by the platform. In the Caribbean, I think the majority of fishing vessels operating in our waters are small-scale fishers, vessels that do not transmit EIS, and vessels that, because of their size and construction, are not easily detected by the satellite detection sensors. So the platform is not able to detect a lot of the vessels that are actually engaged in fishing in our waters. There's also the potential for false alerts. However, as the platform continues to operate, the accuracy of these alerts gets better and better, so we get less and less false alerts of suspicious activity. And of course, maritime patrols are still required for confirmation of the activity identified by the platform, and of course for interdiction, arrest, and ultimate prosecution of offenders. So just to wrap up on this, Skylight is an excellent tool that we use in the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. It assists us with building our domain awareness in support of combating illegal fishing in our waters. And it allows us to build an idea of fishing activity and all other types of activity in the wider maritime space, not only within our areas of jurisdiction, but within the wider Caribbean area. It leverages the power of satellite technology, AI, and machine learning to deliver a very user-friendly experience, and it really advances the ability of our analysts to create valuable intelligence products based on amounts of data that would be otherwise impossible for our analysts to manage. However, the limitations of the platform, it is mostly dependent on AIS transmission by vessels, which again is a very limiting factor when we look at fishing activity in the region because of the low rate of AIS adoption among fishing vessels in the Caribbean region. And it still requires the use of other tools to effectively combat illegal fishing. However, we've incorporated the use of other tools to support our use of Skylight. And what we found is that Skylight is best used in support of our maritime operations. It's best used, we use it to streamline our operations, to target specific areas of activity, and to go after specific offending vessels for fisheries enforcement. This is my contact information, and I will remain here for any questions. I look forward to any questions from any of our attendees. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And as you mentioned correctly, so yes, it's very important to be able to track small vessels as well. The panelist from Barbados, Dr. Shelley Cox, was actually going to talk about that, the vessel trackers for small vessels that are used in Barbados currently. She is unable to join us, unfortunately. If she is still able to join, she might be able to join over the next half an hour, we're not sure. But in any case, we will ask her if we can place her PPT, her presentation on the website, and not so that way we can make that information available for anyone interested about what ways they're using to track vessels for small-scale fishing. Okay, thank you so much. Next, we have Annie Mihajas from the Global Fishing Watch.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Mihajas, and I'm a product manager at Global Fishing Watch. And today I'm going to be going over a couple of our different tools, but I'll be focused mainly on the Marine Manager. So who are we? Global Fishing Watch is an international organization. We're based all over the globe, and we use satellite technology to be able to better describe what human activity is in our ocean. And our mission and purpose is that by supporting greater transparency, we are able to help the sustainable management of our oceans. So we are a complementary tool to Skylight, the presentation that you just saw. So I'll be going over some of the similar technologies that both of us have here. We use different satellite data in order to reveal more activity at sea. We use AIS data from satellites, which is mainly on larger vessels. And we work with individual governments to be able to also provide VMS data on our maps. In addition, we use radar, which can penetrate clouds and mainly identifies metal vessels or metal objects that are larger than 15 or 20 meters. And we also use satellite data that detects night lights, which, as it sounds, is any lights in the night ocean. So this can be useful, especially for vessels such as squid jigging, which uses large lights in order to attract the squid. And then we are working increasingly on bringing in optical imagery, which will be able to detect smaller and smaller vessels that are 10 meters and greater. And we are also exploring the use of planet data, which would be able to look at, which has a 3-meter resolution. So using all of the satellite data, what we do is that we use our algorithms and machine learning in order to detect when vessels are fishing or not. We also have an extensive vessel database that brings together over 40 public registries so that we are able to provide a better picture of individual vessels. We are working on our ports. We also include data on transshipment, which is when two vessels maybe are within a specific distance for a specific period of time of each other. And then using our radar data and night lights data, we are also able to help to detect dark targets, which is vessels that may not be transmitting any AIS or VMS data. So what do our tools provide? Across the board, we have historic data. Our AIS data dates back to 2012. So this really helps people to be able to see patterns within vessels across time. We have near real-time data. So our data is published with a 72-hour delay. Our tools are also easy to use. And most importantly, they are accessible and free. Anyone can log on and access this data. So we have several different tools or products. We have the Global Fishing Watch map, which is kind of our catch-all. Carrier vessels, which focuses specifically on these transshipment events. Marine Manager, which brings together our human activity data alongside environmental activity data, which is what I will briefly talk about today. Our API portal, which is where users can bring in our data into their own platforms. So if you're more tech savvy, this could be really useful for you. And then Vessel Viewer, which focuses on individual vessel profiles and their histories. So the Marine Manager portal, as I said, brings together human activity data together with environmental data and was founded by Donna Britarelli. So I'm just going to go over a couple of characteristics of the Marine Manager portal, and then I will give a super quick demo so you can see how easy it is to use. Anyone can log on to the Marine Manager portal. You can type in your area of interest and automatically create a workspace. And what's also important to us here is not only can you create a workspace, but anything that you see that you are interested in, you can save into your profile or your account, and you can also easily share it with others if you wish to do so. In addition to all the human activity data that I talked about, we have global environmental data sets within the Marine Manager portal, and we just recently added 11 new ones, and we will continue to add more and more based on user feedback. So if you have any insights, you have any comments, it's really useful to us because we want these tools to be as useful as possible to all of you and are constantly taking in feedback. So we added data sets including habitat layers such as coral reefs, mangroves, seagrasses, and also oceanographic variables, including dissolved oxygen, temperature, and salinity. And then you can also filter all of our environmental layers. So this is an example off the coast of Japan, where we filtered both sea surface temperature, and we've also filtered the apparent fishing effort for drifting longlines, because here you can see the patterns between the temperature, the filtered temperature, and the fishing effort, because these vessels are targeting albacore tuna, which are very temperature dependent. And not only can you upload data, which I will show you in a moment, but you can also download all of our data to be able to use in other programs or in other analyses. And then we have a lot of different supporting materials, including a user guide, FAQs, and tutorials. And we've also conducted training sessions in different parts of the world. The specific one was in Madagascar. And so, as I mentioned earlier, your feedback is really essential to be able to help us to understand your needs, improve our data quality, build innovative features, and continue to improve. And so I'm just going to really briefly show you how to enter our platform. If you go to globalfishingwatch.org, this is what you will see. So if you go to Map and Data and Marine Manager Portal, you can enter our portal right here. As you can see down here, I'm already logged into our account, or my account. And we're just going to go to See Global for now, so I can explain what you're seeing on the map. There's three main questions that you can answer here. There is the where, so you can zoom in and out in the map here, and the grid cell size will change accordingly. If you're looking for a specific area, you can type it in here. And if you want to change the base map, you can do so to see the satellite base map here. This is useful if you're looking at nearshore data. This is our time bar. You can either change the time bar by selecting a date range of interest or by moving these cursors here. And as I mentioned, you can hone in into hours of a day or look across multiple years. So this is the when, and then this is the what. What's very important with any of these layers is the filter button here. For fishing effort, for instance, you can filter by source, by AIS or BMS, by flags, and gear types. And so this is our algorithms that have determined when vessels are fishing or not. Vessel presence looks at where all vessels are, not just fishing vessels, at any given point in time that have AIS data. And then if we scroll further down, these are the night lights and radar vessel detections, which is what detects metal objects. If you want to search for a specific vessel, you can do so here. And you can pin that to a map. So if we look at Eagle, for instance, sorry, let's look at this one here. You can download the vessel track if you want to. You can use this icon here to center the map on the vessel track. And we'll just give it a moment to load. You can even animate it if you want to animate the vessel track. And then here are environmental layers. Here are 3 default ones that we have, but you can also add any others that you wish, including bathymetry, the habitat layers that I talked about, and different oceanographic variables. So we could add bathymetry for now, for instance. And then lastly, we also have these reference layers here. And the ability for users to upload their own data sets. So this is really useful if you have any survey sites, if you have any animal tracks, if you have any other vessel tracks that you would like to upload here. I am going to upload whale shark tracks that I obtained from MoveBank. So this is whale sharks in Spanish. And it automatically will populate with what they think the latitude and longitude is. If you have more than one individual, so we have more than one whale shark in this case, we can select the appropriate field. And then what's super useful is with any of uploaded data, you can also filter the data. So in this case, we could filter the data based on the sensor type that was used. So to be able to go to this data set, I'm just going to center the map on the vessel track. And we can see all of the different whale shark tracks here. And if we want to filter based on sensor type, we can do so. So which whale shark tracks use GPS? It's actually most of them. And which ones used the Argos Doppler shift? It's not registering right now, but it should only be one of them. And then the last part that I just wanted to show all of you is you can also analyze data over time. And this is useful for looking at the evolution of vessel presence, the evolution of an environmental variable or a fishing effort within a location. So based on any reference layers that you turn on, or if you upload your own, whether it's an EEZ or an MPA, you can download the data or you can analyze the data. And if you analyze the data, it will show you for your time period, for your area of interest, what does any of the selected layers that you have look like over time? So in this case, what is the fishing effort within Barbados for the layers that we have? And so here you can see an evolution. If it's a marine protected area, for instance, you can look at a before and after a specific period of time. How has activity changed? So where it's red, activity has increased, and where it's blue, activity has decreased. Then you can also look at the specific vessels that are within your area of interest. So there's 5 vessels flagged to Venezuela, 2 to Chinese Taipei, and so on. And you can even pin these vessels to your workspace if you want to look at it in further detail. So thank you very much for your time. This is just a very brief overview going over our platform. There's a lot more intricacies to it, but I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to what you can potentially do. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. Here is my email. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Annie. So we do have a few questions from the participants, but we also have Dr. Shelley and Cox joining us now. Shelley, if you're able at all to limit the presentation just under 10 minutes, so we at least have a few minutes for questions, we would greatly appreciate it. If you can make it shorter, that would be even better. Again, we're just running out of time, and we really welcome everyone's questions, and we'll try to facilitate discussion further. We'll exchange information with panelists and make sure that conversation continues even after the event. Thank you so much again, Annie, and please, Shelley. Shelley, you are still muted, unfortunately.
Yes, I just need confirmation that you can hear me and see the screen before I begin.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, a pleasant good morning from beautiful Barbados, and thanks for inviting me to be able to speak briefly on our DigiFish initiative in Barbados. I am actually in a Fisheries Advisory Committee meeting. That's why I wasn't available earlier. Lots of fires to out with fisheries management, as we know, but it does emphasize the importance for evidence-based decision-making and the reality that we need data. Data is very scarce in our context as small island development states, and with limited staff capacity as well. This is why we have to engage and use the emerging technologies to help us do our job well. So I'm just going to be very brief in terms of providing you a little bit about our situation in Barbados and the work that we've been doing for the past 2 years with the DigiFish initiative. And just a quick fact, we are celebrating 80 years as a fisheries division in Barbados on April 1st. And this is one of our guiding missions, is to manage and sustainably develop the fisheries resources. But we know that we can't experiment with different fisheries management measures unless we have the data. And, you know, we conceptualized this DigiFish initiative from as far back as 2019. And we were successful in getting some funding. And an initiative like this, of course, could not be done without collaborations with private sector, our Fisher Folk organizations, NGOs like the Barbados Environmental Conservation Trust, and all of the others that you see here, Export Barbados, Complete Caribbean, Remora, Mr. Fish as well, Blue Shell Productions, all of these agencies working together to promote the use of digital technologies and innovative data analytic methods. And it was really about supporting the application of ecosystem approach to fisheries in Barbados. And of course, this approach really puts people at the center and people working together to find balance. So in order to find balance and make specific decisions, we have to understand the environment that we're living in and the fishing behavior, how often they're going out, how far out to sea. how is fishing changing through time? And then, the policies as we have related to renewable energy systems and using these technologies. So we have two phases of DigiFish was our experimentation with vessel monitoring systems, specific devices, solar devices. We're using two companies right now. The smaller and more economical devices are from Pelagic Data Systems. These are cellular. And then we have the satellite systems, which are Remora vessels. Right now, we have the Pelagic Data Systems on 38 smaller vessels. These are mostly open deck vessels up to 24 feet. And then our 40 satellite Remora vessels, we've installed 10 so far. These are on our long line vessels, which range from about 32 to 55 feet long. And they are venturing far beyond our exclusive economic zone, some up to 700 miles off. So, in terms of the phases and what our objectives were, is to really foster these productive partnerships between industry stakeholders, even our stakeholders in monitoring, control, and surveillance, like the Coast Guard and Marine Police. We wanted to demonstrate how fishing changes through time. Although we had a lot of anecdotal evidence about where the guys go fishing, we never had that evidence base. We thought that some of these smaller boats were only going 10 miles offshore. We're realizing that they're going 25 miles offshore, even sometimes to access some of the private fish aggregating devices that have been deployed. And then we wanted to look at building out traceability. So how do we access these premium markets where there are socially conscious consumers who want to know where the fish was caught, what vessel, what sustainable methods are being used. And that is how we came with the integration then of the satellite vessel monitoring system and the smart scale. So key benefits, there are benefits for us as fisheries management authorities in terms of monitoring and analyzing fleet behavior, observing changes in fishing effort from year to year, providing data to support fisheries management and marine spatial planning. We're working with our sister agency, the Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados, who is leading the charge of the marine spatial planning process. And we have been using our data from the vessel tracking to identify areas where there's a lot of fishing effort. And when we integrate the catch data, we can see areas where the catch per unit effort is decreasing, and that would help to prioritize areas for rehabilitation. And on the fisheries side, besides the safety reasons of knowing where exactly they're fishing in case anybody gets into difficulty, they can also use the information to target where maximum profits could be gained sustainably, better marketing of the catches, knowing where to fish efficiently and effectively. Some of our fishers have been tracking their usage of fuel as well to see where exactly they're being more efficient. And this is, just a screenshot. We have approximately 31 landing sites around the island, some with more infrastructure and facilities than others. So we wanted to target those that had most of the infrastructure. So we put three to five installed vessels at these particular landing sites, and Bridgetown being the area where the longliners would be installed. So this was our first installation starting in 2021, and we have a good coverage around the island. Of course, this is only 38 of approximately 600 vessels that we have in Class 1 and Class 2. And then we wanted to cover all of our longliners, which were 40 of them. So we use this satellite. This is the solar cellular from Pelagic Data Systems. You can see the product specifications. Due to the interest of time, I wouldn't go into detail, but you can see here the device installed on the top of one of our smaller vessels. We refer to this as a day boat. It just goes out, close to shore. You can also see that our vessels are using PVC cells to charge their battery chargers as well. So we're seeing a change as it relates to fishermen uptaking the renewable energy system technologies. And this is at one of our landing sites. So you can see the installation. And then this is a screenshot of the portal itself where you can see the locations, but you can also click in, see how many trips, how long the trips were, how far they ventured. You can replay a trip as well. I won't get into all of that detail, but we also perform data analytics, and we can look at all of the trips in one shot, but separate them by community. And you know what was interesting, that sister countries like St. Lucia, who had tried community-based management because their fishers always stay within one community, we realized, of course, that couldn't work for us because our fishers may start at one port and they could fish all around the island. So we knew that wasn't the best type of arrangement for us. Although we lead the trust towards co-management, but you can already see from this. You can also see some of the dots. This is where we realize the frequency at which the boats were visiting the fishing aggregating devices. Some of them just 4 miles from shore, some of them 7.8 miles of shore in about 1,400 feet of water. And then we saw a boat in Concept Bay going all over the place. And then we realized that he was using floating pads. So we, in engagement with our stakeholders, we had some idea, but none of it was recorded, none of it was documented. And this was very interesting because, since we've put this in, we had to be sharing our data with coastal and other stakeholders to help build the case for the needs of fisheries priority areas and the kinds of policy measures we have to put in place for safety, the kind of regulations we need to have on our boats, the safety equipment, knowing how far they venture from shore now. So all of this information that we got from this experiment, we've been able to use this. And we went a little bit step further in terms of calculating fishing effort. So here you would see in this hexagon and the scale there, you can see more hours spent in certain areas around the island. Some of these places are around areas with fishing aggregating devices, but some are on snapper related bars. So then we've started now to be able to map out the fishing grounds, know the local names, know the proper names of these fishing grounds. So we have that participatory mapping and dialogue going on so people can actually identify areas. And this is very critical in terms of integrating the local knowledge with the scientific information so that this can help us even with, our climate change adaptation strategies. So we've had these devices out on, this was a example I was sharing in terms of site where Oystins is in the south of the island, but you see somebody went all the way up to the north because they were targeting a specific species. And then in Concept Bay, using the fishing aggregating devices, but not the anchored ones, the floating ones, you would see how far he would venture to be able to get those pelagic fish. And just again, more screenshots to show how far they've been fishing. So that's a smaller vessel. The larger vessels here is a good representation of one of our longline vessels, one of my favorite, one of the wooden ones, Deep Impact. And you see here the installation of the satellite device on the longline vessel, just a bit more in terms of very simple in the installation, less than 5 minutes. And then people can connect to the platform right after. And what we started to see is, which we've been told, but we've been able to record a fishing trip up to 320 miles offshore. And then what was interesting too, as it relates to our advocacy with the World Trade Organization Agreement on Fisheries Subsidies, was the fact that we were venturing far beyond the EEZ. So we needed to have, special requirements as it relates to actually contributing these subsidies to the fishing pool. and the fact that long lining is one of our developing fisheries, and that we need to offer support not only as it relates to, you know, fuel, but the gear, the circle hooks, the deep set long line gear. So this has provided good evidence base for us advocating in those negotiations. And I talked earlier about the smart scale and the fact that when integrated with the vessel monitoring systems, it would speak to the VMS on board. It would show where exactly the fish was caught, the vessel it came on. And once the fish is passed through the scale, the weight length is registered, and then you can input the temperature and the grade of the fish using the touch screen. And then this smart scale will produce a fisheries tag. We're working on funding through Compy Caribbean, and we're hopeful that by June, we'll be able to have one of these smart scales in place. But we were successful in constructing a prototype and testing it with our partner, Remora Fishing Traceability. This is a port in Costa Rica. So we're looking to have 2 of those smart scales installed in our market, Bridgetown Fisheries. And this is just some screenshots from the portal that will be connected to the smart scale and the vessel monitoring systems. And, you know, all of this in terms of the experimentation, testing it out, having online and in-person consultations with the fishermen to see how their digital literacy has been enhanced. But these are some of the applications that we have. So I think, you know, we have 1,156 vessels in our fleet. Right now, we have the funding that is covering the 38 smaller ones, the 40 long liners. So we do have a lot to do in terms of funding the entire fleet. We're currently going through a commercial remarketing exercise, so we will know exactly out of this 1,156 vessels, how many of them are active, and then we can start continuing the resource mobilization to fully equip the vessels with the equipment, but the ongoing data service that would be needed as well, and seeing how best we can get smart skills at the landing sites around the island. Quickly, we are embarking. I was going to show a little bit about our enhanced data collection efforts, and we have been using Kobo Toolbox with our caption data effort form. Our data collectors are equipped with Galaxy Tab Active Pro tablets. You know, the data is being collected efficiently. Our vessel inspection form as well was digitized and using the Kobo Toolbox. So our vessel inspectors are using tablets as well. And this is your newest engagement as it relates to the measures required by ICAT as it relates to observers on board. But because our vessels are too small to have a living observer, we've been looking at electronic monitoring systems and having discussions with Shell Catch about the installation of these vessel cameras aboard our long liners. So we're looking at starting that within the next few months. And I think what's important about this particular solution is that there is artificial intelligence helping to analyze the data without you having to sit and watch all the hours and hours of video. So you can build in certain alerts that will alert you if there's any interactions with mammals or any interactions with turtles, or if a particular fish looks like it's in one of the minimum sizes. So these are requirements that we have to build out. And Shell Catch has a good track record with working with several fisheries around the world, lessons learned, and we want to be able to use this platform to support us in meeting our ICAT, which is the Regional Management Organization, but also to enhance our digital transformation for the fishery sector. And I think our concept and vision is to, you know, have all of this data with a simplified data visualization dashboard on our website so people can still see some of the information, but if you want more detailed reports, that would be available too. But we think it's important for our stakeholders to have an idea on, you know, how many fish have been landed, how many vessel inspections we've done, how many haul-ups we've done, for persons to have an idea on how productive our sector is. And I had part of a poem here in terms of one commissioned, which really looked at marine fish and efficiency and how we can integrate innovation, where it's not a replacement for instinct, but an extension of the way we really think and appreciation of intrinsic values. So this poem does inspire us to keep on pressing on. We know it takes lots of resources to really, you know, experiment, but to sustain some of these digital initiatives. But I think we have these good partnerships and collaborations with several technology companies and I can say exchanges as well. DigiFish has been rolled out recently in St. Vincent, and they're doing the installation of 30 vessel monitoring systems there. We learned from our neighbors in Montserrat. I just learned yesterday that St. Kitts will be using pelagic data systems soon as well too on their 600 boats. So lots of lessons learned across countries in the Caribbean. And we look forward to, you know, this digital transformation to really help us to inform decision-making. We talk about data-driven solutions and evidence-based. And we know with our limited resources, we need the technologies to help us reach the vision that we have. And this is also key for youth engagement, because you show this kind of exercise at a school, and it has happened to me. And the children came up to me, you know, I thought fishing was just an old guy going out to sea. They didn't realize we had all this like technology, and, you know, they wanted to be a data science. So now they could see the applications of that and see fishing as a job that they want to aspire to. And I think that's very important. So I want to thank you for your time and attention. Thanks for accommodating me amidst a busy day. And you can let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Shelley, for the presentation. We are out of time at this point, unfortunately. We have received a number of questions. I think nearly all of them have been answered. I think we have just one question left, unfortunately, unanswered. But we will continue the conversation. We're happy to share the email addresses of our panelists. Many thanks again to all the panelists for their wonderful presentations. So we will share the email addresses of the panelists on the website, so you can contact them directly with any questions. We will also summarize this event in a short report, and we will share the recording of these presentations as well. And we really hope that this has been useful for everyone in attendance, and we hope this conversation continues about the important role of technology and various tools for data with regard to fisheries management. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us today.